Okay, I'd like to call to order the July 10th meeting of the OSIDA Board. Could we start with a roll call, please?
Absolutely. Chairman Lyman?
Here.
Mr. Schultz?
Here.
Chairwoman Rolls?
Here.
Mr. Siegfried?
Here.
Mr. Henry?
Present.
And Ms. Gurry.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the agenda item 2. I just wanted to reiterate that this meeting is conducted in compliance with the Open Meeting Act, and the meeting notice and agenda have been filed as required by Oklahoma statute. Okay, and if we have any guests that would like to introduce themselves, we'd love to know that you're here.
I'm Nicole Miller. I represent House District 82, which is upper northwest Oklahoma City, west of Deer Creek. So I'm just happy to be here. Thanks for making it available.
Thank you.
Chair of our House Budget Committee.
Excellent. Thank you very much. All right, and then we have 2 other guests. Thank you. Very good. Nice to have you here. Thank you very much for being here. Okay. All right. Any other announcements from anyone? Okay. Our next item on the agenda, we are going to swear in General Robert Lyman to our board. He is our newest board member, and he has gone through Senate confirmation, but the next thing is to officially swear him in here in our board meeting. So. Please repeat after me. I, Robert Lyman,
I, Robert Lyman,
do solemnly affirm
do solemnly affirm
that I will support, obey, and defend
that I will support, obey, and
the
defend
Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and of the state of Oklahoma,
and of the state of Oklahoma,
and that I will not knowingly
and that I will not knowingly
receive directly or indirectly
receive directly or indirectly
any money or other valuable thing
any money or other valuable thing
for the performance or non-performance of any act or duty
for the performance or non-performance of any act or duty
pertaining to my office
pertaining to my office
other than compensation allowed by law.
other than compensation allowed by law.
I further affirm
I further affirm
that I will faithfully discharge my duties
that I will faithfully discharge my duties
as a board member
as a board member
of the Oklahoma Space Industry Development Authority
of the Oklahoma Space Industry Development Authority
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
There you go.
All right.
You're official.
Thank you.
Very nice. All right. Thank you. Okay, moving on to our next agenda item, which would be the approval of the minutes, which were emailed out and I believe you have there in your packets. I would entertain a motion for approval unless anyone has points to discuss on them.
I move for approval. Second.
Okay, could we please have a vote?
Chairman Lyman?
Yes.
Mr. Schultz?
Aye.
Chairwoman Rolls?
Aye.
Mr. Siegfried?
Aye.
And Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Thank you very much. And next on our agenda is the approval of the treasurer's reports, which you will have received that information.
Madam Chairman, I've reviewed the report and I make a motion to approve as provided.
Okay.
Second.
All right. Any discussion? Okay, can we please have a vote?
Chairman Lyman?
Aye.
Mr. Schultz?
Aye.
Chairwoman Rolls?
Aye.
Mr. Siegfried?
Aye.
And Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. All right, moving on then to item number 7. Our Executive Director, Craig Smith, will give his report.
All right, thank you very much. I'll give you a quick ARPA and PREP update. The ARPA, for those that may not be familiar, those are federal funds. That's the American Rescue Plan. monies that came to the state of Oklahoma. The legislature chose to assign some of those monies to various agencies for infrastructure and other related projects. They gave OSIDA 4.25 million. 4 million of that we had dedicated toward our water and wastewater projects. We meet tomorrow, and this is kind of some pictorials of what we're going to be discussing, but we're going to meet with our engineering firm tomorrow to review the 95% package. This will be the final review before we the issue for construction, so we'll go over the finer details of all the parameters of what the engineers have put together. They've been doing some study and analysis and engineering on all the water system and the wastewater system, and some equipment we're going to need to buy. We'd hoped to have this a couple of months ago, but we realized that some of the tanks that I just showed you had some infrastructure repairs that were necessary on the inside, so we had to hire a subcontractor to come and do those assessments on those tanks. So it's put us back a little bit, but it'll also probably adjust be the final price of our package. But we'll meet with them tomorrow. The issue for construction we expect probably in August. Then we'll review the bids, and probably in September, and then the notice to proceed we expect probably the end of September. I saw a report that just came to us just minutes before this meeting that they expect the project to be 12 to 15 months. Is that what it is? So we expect it should be completed by winter of 2025. The broadband portion of that, and this is a slide from last month's meeting, it hasn't moved much from them. We're still waiting on some approvals from OMES to certify the company that has been selected for us to do the implementation of the project. So we're waiting on them. It's apparently a single person that makes this, and so she's been out with some illness and some other issues, and so that's what we've been waiting on. So once that clears, it should flow pretty smoothly. It's equipment. The fiber line has been laid to the building, and then we'll complete it to the tower and other resources or other assets, and then we'll also do some wireless bridges, and then we'll also utilize some of our prep funding to be able to implement gate access codes and cameras and things of that nature to add the security and improve the security in the park, utilizing the newly installed high-speed internet.
Excellent.
The prep monies, this is Progressing Rural Economic Prosperity. These are state funds that the OSIDA received. This is, we received $27.5 million in funding for this. We identified some projects that we needed to have completed. Certainly the runway is the main asset of this facility. Initial thoughts and beliefs on this, we've figured probably about $7 to $10 million might take care of the runway. We've gotten some figures recently from the engineer that show that it's going to be 13 just for the pavement. And then now we also wanted to do electrical, painting, signage, and some other things. And so we believe will probably be the 13 million for the pavement, which will improve the runway, the taxiways, a portion of the apron, and some other taxiways that are over by the tower. And that'll be the 13 million portion of it. We're going to utilize about $2.5 million of our JUA funding from the Air Force. That's our biggest tenant. And they will they give us a certain portion of money to do this, and so we've got some money set aside that we're going to apply toward that. So together, that'll be roughly about $19.5 million on that project, leaving us about $5 million for our detect and avoidance technology that we'd like to have for at least one of our customers and maybe several more, a detect and avoidance capability at this airport. Radar coverage currently comes out of Fort Worth Center. And for companies like Kratos and others that want to do some unmanned operations, having a local detect and avoidance technology is something that they'd requested. We put in the request to the legislature, and so we've set aside $5 million. We're working with the Department of Aviation and Aerospace, or Aeronautics and Aerospace, and we're actually reviewing some requests for proposals of RFIs or RFPs, or we're reviewing the proposals at this point. And then we expect, hopefully by August, to be able to start selecting and doing the interviews with the companies and narrow that down. And hopefully by this winter, be able to have some kind of project or a process in place so that we can provide that. And what we'd also like to see is it be portable. We don't want to have a structure sitting in Burns Flat only for the use of Burns Flat. We'd like to work statewide and have this on a mobile unit that we could take to various locations wherever that may be taking place, whether it's Choctaw Nation or Skyway 36 in Tulsa or Stillwater or Fort Sill. This will be a state-owned asset that we would maneuver throughout the state. And then, of course, some of the other funding portions, that $4.5 million property improvements, looking at the ARPA funds and the projects for that, it looks like it's going to come in over the $4 million that we had anticipated and that we received from ARPA monies. So a portion of that $4.5 million that remains here will probably go toward the completion of that project, which is good because it's going to spend every bit of the ARPA monies, and then we'll tap into the prep monies to be able to finish those projects. Returning ARPA money would have been a nightmare, so to be able to expend it all would be really useful for us. Director Henry?
So, on the top with the runway repair,
Yes.
where we're combining it with the JUA funding, is any of that, the repairs, some things that the JUA would not cover?
No.
Okay, so you don't have to worry about making sure this pays for this and this pays for that?
No.
Okay.
Everything on the airport, pavement, striping, lighted, all that, and signage, all that falls under what the Air Force requests us to maintain. So that was an easy deal to do. And that expends the money so that we can turn around, General, when we revisit the JUA. This is an article that we want to bring back to them and say, look, we were responsible. We fixed this up, and we need to. This is not sufficient to sustain and maintain this runway going forward. So
normally, following the 90-10, if it was a $10 million project, they'd pay $9 million. So is the $2.5 million their max?
no, it's just
Budget.
what we have stored up in the JUA account right now.
Okay, are they willing to go higher on the project?
The contract with the JOA is a 5-year contract.
Yeah.
It renews in March of 2026. So that's what they do is that when I renewed it in 2021, the figure we had identified at that point was to go for the next 5 years, and they essentially won't talk to me until we get close to the conclusion of that contract. So when we go back to them in 2026, in early 2026, we're going to go back with these figures and say, look, this is what we've done, and we can't let this fall apart. I'm going to need more money to sustain what.
So you're saying we have not, should not, or will not go to them and inform them that we've got this large project, we want to apply $2.5 million to it. Are there any more dollars? I mean, basically asking if they want to, or would be open to participating more than what's in the account.
I'd like to be able to do that, absolutely. If there's an opportunity, General, I don't know if you're familiar with that process, but if that's an opportunity, I've reached out to them a number of times to tell them what we've been doing and keep them apprised of the project, and I've gotten no response. So another thing that we would like to be able to add to this going forward is maybe some assistance on the firefighter department from Altus has approached us. They've made application for 2 fire trucks, which are going to be longer than the bays in our current firehouse. And so they've approached us and said, shall I say? I mean, they basically said, the state could build this a lot more efficiently than the Air Force and federal government. What would it look like if you guys built it and then you plussed up the JUA in a couple of years to recover those costs? So that's another thing we're looking to see if that might be a possibility to do as well, to say, look, Air Force, we want you to continue to come here. We're willing to make improvements to this firehouse or build another firehouse with your assistance. Oh, and by the way, we just spent $17+ million on our pavement, and we want to be able to maintain that in a proper way. How much can we plus up that JUA contract? So we'll continue to go back to them and keep them apprised if I can get them to respond.
So, sorry, shifting over to the fire, fire capabilities on site, is that in our plans to upgrade or fund the
It-
fire protection?
It isn't currently. It's an Air Force project. They
Okay.
approached us and told us of the notification. Technically, the ARF is there for the Air Force. They will tell you that
Yeah.
their responsibility is for Air Force and DoD equipment. I'd be hard pressed if something did occur that they did not respond, being firemen, and that's what they do. But they will tell you that their responsibility is to the Air Force only.
Okay, thanks.
Some activities we've had at the airport are, Joe, what's that plane called underneath?
That's an Orion. It's a Navy
Submarine.
surveillance plane that, yeah.
Yeah, so
looks
that,
for, drops buoys in the water, find the submarines. They used to be called P3 Orion. I'm not sure what that one's called.
does it land on the carrier? Does it take personnel to the carrier? Is that the one?
They don't.
Okay.
That particular one doesn't.
There's maybe I didn't get a picture of that one. So we've had a few different specialty aircraft land at the airport, which are pretty fun to see. That top picture, those are how many? We had 7 on the apron at one time. Those were carrying crew from NASCAR. And if you'll see, if you guys are NASCAR fans, you might recognize who that is on the right with Kim. And so that's kind of exciting. How many? 700 people
About 700 people.
came through our building and the FBO and the tower during that flight. So they're traveling from one coast to the other. Our airport is an ideal location to stop and refuel and do other services. So having a tower, having a big airport, having a Jet A capable FBO, it gave us about 700 people that came through our building in just a short period of time, twice, on the way out and then on the way back.
Will they be returning? Any feedback?
It depends where the race is. It's family, pit crews, all those associated with NASCAR. So they were going to the Sonoma Raceway in Sonoma County, Northern California. If they have another race out west, they'll stop in here. It's not the first time they have.
So, yeah, so they had a good experience. FBO was good.
Absolutely, and that's a relationship that the FBO had built up with this team.
I believe I heard that the FBO did such a good job that the CEO of Victory Air actually gave him a call to commend him personally.
Kind of compared them to a pit crew. You guys filled our planes faster than any other stop we've ever had before. So there was high fives all around. Working with the community of Burns Flat, we put this agreement together with them a couple of years ago. There's a space right across from our building that they'd identified. Most of the people who work at the city of Burns Flat used to work for SWOTA, used to work for OSIDA back in the day, so everybody's very familiar with the facility and the sites. And so their fire chief reached out to me a couple of years ago and said, hey, rather than landing inside the fence, is there a place we can land outside the fence that saves our ambulances and our support crew a lot of time if we can utilize one of those empty lots out in front of your building to be able to land medevac helicopters. And so this is just right across from our building, unfortunately, last week. But fortunately, we do have the capability and be able to get somebody metaflighted to Oklahoma City in just a matter of minutes. So unfortunately, we had to utilize that, but it was great to have that community support and that partnership. And this is something that one of our other directors went to Burns Flat recently and reached out to the clinic and said, what would you like? And they said, well, it'd be swell if we could have those letters painted. So, and this has actually created a couple of different things. It shows you how we've been able to use the lift that we bought a few months ago. It's one of those things that I can't tell you how many times that lift ends up getting used. Once we bought it, it's like you said, Director Schultz, once you have the tool, you find all kinds of uses for it.
You live with that forever and
How
you
did-
get it. and
how
you
did we-
don't
how do
know
we
you
live
have to
without it? Yeah. And then some of the demolition projects we've got, these are debris piles. That's just a picture of one. There's probably at least a half dozen, probably at least 3 or 4 scattered throughout the property that have been there for probably decades, just where stuff has been found in the field, plowed in the field, and pushed to a corner. We're having some of our contractors take some of these debris piles and remove them as well. So appearance-wise, we're making some improvements. This was, and this is for you, Director Henry. That's the building that connected these two buildings. That was a flat roof. It hasn't been utilized and usable since probably the 80s, maybe the 90s. You could grow potatoes in there, so we had that demolished. When we did, it actually connected to both of those hangars, and the subcontractor took the whole building out before making the adjustments to those walls. So we've had to repair the walls, or we're actually in the process of repairing the walls to those hangars. But we'll be able to get those completed before Boeing returns in. Yeah, once we tore the building down, we realized that there had been a fire there at some point as well. So you could see fire damage on the inside of or the outside of those hangars as well. So lots of stuff. When you start taking things down, you find, finds all kinds of hidden stories.
That's your new excavator in the background of that picture.
That is not. No, that was a contractor, but we looked at it with great envy.
Okay.
And this is that building, I call it my landmark, the one up in the top. Unfortunately, anybody that came out to OSIDA, that's a building that they had to drive by. When the governor came out a couple of years ago, that's a building he had to drive by. Those tanks were right just off to the right of it. If I'd just connected those pictures, that would have probably been an actual shot of that area. So that building and those tanks, that bottom picture is that same site now. So
Much better.
It's truly remarkable. It's hard to find a place to turn because you don't have your landmark building to tell you
Right.
when you're supposed to turn. But that building on the left was just, that was the bane of my existence when I first got out there. I was like, what a hideous building. And those garage doors would blow in the wind. It was just an attractive nuisance. People would drop trash and debris inside that building. It was just not pleasant. So it's gone. Oh my goodness, where's Gabe? I thought he would be here. He was supposed to be here to
I
give
have
us
not heard.
Huh?
I haven't heard anything
I hadn't
from
heard either.
him. Well, thank you for that presentation. Anyone have any further questions or comments? Nope. Well, there's a lot of good progress being made out there. So our next agenda items are related to the agreement that OSIDA has with the Artemis Group. And we anticipated that we would have an Artemis Group representative here today, but we do not. But I think we could still discuss the board business that we have in front of us here. Okay, so we won't have their update, but on agenda item number 9.
Director?
Yes.
We probably just need to table the Artemis update. It is an agenda item, so
Okay.
either table or.
We shall table agenda item number 8. Thank you. It's so good to have Bailey here with us, who she keeps us on the straight and narrow. Okay, good to have both Baileys here with us, by the way. Okay. All right. So on agenda item number 9,
Do we vote on the type?
okay. So during the January 2024 board meeting, this board voted to renew the Artemis contract until May 31st of 2024 in anticipation that there would be an agreement in place with the Department of Commerce and the Artemis Group that then OSIDA would be under that umbrella. At this time, that still has not come to fruition yet, although they're making progress. It is just not complete. So this new contract with the Artemis Group is before us today to discuss. And the new contract renewal that we have a proposal from them, which would basically be a month-to-month term fee for service, hourly fee up to a maximum, and that we would renew month to month, and it could be terminated by either party with 15 days of written notice. And the final termination date would be June 30th, 2025, so it would not extend past another year from now. So that is one item. We have two separate items, but that is the first one
It's
for us to
effectively,
address.
it's the same agreement we've had with the Artemis Group to help advocate for us and bring companies to Oklahoma to talk space and talk about and learn about our capabilities here. Having the former NASA administrator, who's the director of the Artemis Group, advocate for the state of Oklahoma at trade shows, meetings at the Capitol, inviting companies that probably couldn't spell Oklahoma before, but now are interested in our capabilities here. And so that's been a real help for us in that regard. And so we'll continue this relationship with them. Commerce may be able to put something together, but we wanted to still have something that's specific to OSIDA and our purposes here as well.
Mhm.
So in effect, a continuation of the same statement of work, if you will, scope of work.
Precisely.
Based on the payment schedule the director mentioned, okay.
Yes.
Chairwoman mentioned.
Mhm. Until such time as the commerce agreement is finalized and then.
And then the intent is to use that
Yes.
as part, okay.
Yes.
Should we put a date on it?
It's got either party can end it with 15 days' notice, so it's a month to
Yes.
month, through at least June of next year.
Well, so as I was reading that, it would, that would be the ending date. If we don't terminate it prior to June 30th of 2025, that would be the date that it would terminate.
And understanding is Department of Commerce is working with Artemis Group and Department of Commerce's intent is to have an agreement before then, is that correct? Okay.
We'd hope to have had it already, and that's going to be the
Yeah,
next
that's
agenda
okay.
item, so.
That's why I like to have a date. Let's talk about it again.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah, and have a sunset on it that, well, June of 2025 will be the ultimate conclusion, but should circumstances change with commerce and they were able to get a project in place and it doesn't benefit us, then we can either keep it or not.
Mhm. Then we could revisit how we want to move forward if we want to continue to move forward. Does that work for you?
Yeah, I just needed a date. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter
Okay.
when. So to be sets a time clock for us to say,
Yeah.
have this vote again.
Yeah. All right, so this is, any other questions or discussion?
Bailey, you've reviewed the contract, changed all the dates, got all the i's dotted, t's crossed.
What is a quorum, 3 or 4?
Our rule was 7, so 4.
Okay. So, for me, this is a question for you, Bailey, Attorneys General. We do not have a contract with Artemis, my company, but we have done business with them, and we will likely do business with them in the future, and on a project or case-by-case basis. So I don't know if I need to recuse myself or not, but I wanted to be transparent on the state business matters.
I think the safe bet would be to recuse yourself if you believe
Okay.
that there is a potential.
Potential or even perceived conflict, okay? So I'm sorry to say,
That we will not have a quorum.
I'll recuse myself.
You're in the
Yes.
same boat.
Mhm. And I am in the same boat. We actually do have an agreement with them and are working with them. So I have not participated in any of the decision-making regarding the Artemis Group.
So lacking a quorum, then what is our process to table it for the next time? Or is there an
Yes.
opportunity to, because we're left without an agreement then, in this instance, right? Is there a process through which we can virtually vote the other members, or I'm not sure how it works, so.
I
you've
do
got
not
question.
believe we have that
Okay.
You have to be in person.
capacity.
Okay.
I think we have to meet and vote in person.
Okay.
Okay, well then, we will need to table this issue, and then we will need to table the following issue as well. Would you like to discuss the following issue, or just wait till we have a quorum and then we can discuss it at that point?
Just wait.
Okay. All right, so tabling 8, 9, and 10.
Well,
Yes.
could I ask a question on 10?
Yes.
So why are we ratifying payment? Or why do we have to approve that if we already approved it?
Well, our contract, OSIDA's contract with them ended May 31st. And we anticipated moving to a commerce contract at that
Oh,
point.
okay.
And then the current contract is, I think, begins in July. It's like a July 1 start date. So we have a period of a
Again,
month.
I see.
Yes.
June.
I see.
I
The
see.
Yeah,
June
okay.
timeframe that is,
They
I said
continue,
leave
they
it
continue
to
to
the
perform
board.
services.
Okay.
yeah,
Okay, thank you.
yes. Okay.
Can we just make sure, I assume the relationship with Artemis is positive, but let them know we lacked a quorum. Our intent was to address this issue, and so we'll get to it.
I've got a hand, he didn't show up at the meetings.
Yeah. There you go.
Yes.
I just
Point
want
well
that-
taken.
I just
We'll
want
make
them to
sure.
understand why
Yes.
that there's a delay.
Mhm. Very good. Okay, moving on to agenda item 11. Consideration for approval regarding some demolition on some unusable buildings. And let's see here. Craig, do you want to
Yes, ma'am.
talk to that
You
as a
bet.
summary,
So-
please?
In a continuation of removing unused, perhaps dangerous structures and buildings on the campus, we've moved 10, I think, buildings so far, and about 3 debris piles and some other structures that we've moved out. We've reached out to, we've had some contractors on site doing this. We've been able to find 2 to 3. We reached out to them and others to say, we've got some other structures, and I'll list them on this shot right here. Those blast shields that you'll see in that top corner picture, those are steel, very heavy, outdated. They've been there since the 50s, and I don't think they've been used since maybe 1960s. I don't know if they even used them in the 60s, but been a long, long time since they've been used. Those light structures, those, firstly, they're a height hazard. They're probably about 90 feet tall. They haven't worked since at least the 60s. And so we've asked contractors to look at those 2 things, and then that's the pool house building. That was in front of what I'm told was the largest swimming pool in western Oklahoma at one point. I don't know if that's true or not, but the doors have been sealed shut. It's just a standing structure that has no purpose, and so we've asked contractors to look at that as well, including these 2 latrine buildings that are positioned behind our hangars over where the Premium Aerospace is operating, and those are 2. I didn't know what they were until recently, but they're unused latrines. There's nothing hooked up in them. They're just in the way. So we had contractors look at that. This building has attracted some interest from possible tenants in the past, and then they step inside, and that's what's inside the building. This building was built to be an ethanol manufacturing plant. So there's huge tanks inside. This kind of gives you a perspective on how big those tanks are. That gentleman there standing next to them. So we've asked a company to come and remove those tanks, and actually the tanks are sitting on round concrete slabs which sit up about 1 foot, maybe 1.5 feet. So not only the tanks have to come out, those slabs have to come out. So we reached out to, all the scaffolding around them as well. So we and there's actually 2, maybe 3 tanks on the outside of this building as well. So we've asked contractors to look at these and give us bids to tell us what it would take to take them all down. One of the contractors told us if we can't get all the bids, it's not worth us moving our equipment and personnel out there. So they said if we don't get them all, we don't want to continue on. Their bid would have been the lowest of all if we did all the removals together. But as it was, if we can cherry pick the projects, which we've kind of done in this instance of identifying the buildings that needed to go, and with another contractor that jumped into the race. So we can do those with resources that we have. However, Tomahawk had to contract, or would probably win the contract to take these tanks out of the building. So their project with that entailed in it exceeds my authority. And so that's why I'm coming to the board for a request of $71,450 to Tomahawk Construction to take out this building. the latrines and the blast shields. And then another company that was actually, again, visiting with our community partner, the city of Burns Flat, told us that, of a contractor that they had taking some buildings down. So we reached out to them, and they were actually the ones going to be taking out the pool house and the floodlights. So we spread the wealth with some contractors on these projects, but that one particular contract exceeds my authority, and so I'm coming to the board making the request for $71,450 to Tomahawk Construction.
What is the authority that you've got right now?
50.
50, okay.
So that includes the total removal of the ethanol building, not just the tanks.
Everything inside. So the building.
The building will stand.
The building will continue to stand. I've had interest in the building. It's got garage doors, it's got awning, it's got a fenced yard. It's utilizable asset for somebody. It's in pretty good shape, except for it's unusable for anybody other than when making ethanol.
Did you have a picture of the outside of the building?
Where am I?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
There we go, okay.
So it's got an awning, it's
Mhm.
2 garage doors, and then there's tanks on the west side that are just as large as these on the back side of the building as well. There's 2, maybe 3.
And they'll remove the
Uh-huh.
outside tanks as well?
Yep. The contract is to make that building and clean the yard as well. They'll take all the trees and shrubs out of the yard as well.
Any idea what vintage that building is?
That was probably mid-90s. Yeah, so it was when ethanol started to grow. It was a local gentleman that, I think he was the chem professor at the school, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah.
That built it and had his design, and then unfortunately passed away.
Okay.
And so the family didn't have the recipe, I guess, or didn't
Mhm.
have any desire to continue in that desire
Mhm.
to continue that. So unfortunately, it's been this, and it's one of the first buildings you see when you pull into the campus. So you look at it and you think, oh, that's a pretty decent building.
Mhm.
What can I use it for?
Yeah.
So the objective is to get those other structures cleared up and then make this one potentially a usable asset.
Okay, so you're seeking approval for Tomahawk to really do 3 projects: the latrines, removing all the tanks, and then the blast shields.
Correct.
And then you're also asking for approval, well, this one is within your
Exactly,
authority
but the other
range,
two
but
are.
Dixon would be doing the pool house and removing the floodlights, the
Exactly.
apron floodlights, okay.
And that's neat that, rather than one
Yeah.
company getting all of those projects,
Mhm.
that probably gets a lot of projects throughout the state. These are 2 smaller rural economic
Yeah.
development
Yeah, it's nice.
opportunities for 2 smaller companies to get some project here.
And when you have some local businesses that you can partner with, that's very positive.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
The floodlights I know they don't work now, but can they be used in a future state or LED or,
There,
things that are out there?
all the wiring it'd be cheaper just to build new lights. Plus, where they're located, it's pretty close to the flight line to have something that tall. Without, and unfortunately, none of them have any lights on them right now, so they could potentially be an aerospace hazard. Yeah, if this pictures show it.
I think a couple of them are bent. From when, yeah.
Come on. Where are you?
Yeah.
Yeah, that 4th or
Oh,
5th
wow.
one you can
Yeah.
kind of see is kind of the cattywampus there that.
When them lights were running, the meter was probably spinning like that.
Yeah, it's like a Griswold Christmas.
Right.
And then, what's on the other side of the blast shields? Do we anticipate
That's,
anyone or anything having way more wind than expected? Not from engines, but just big runway.
there's a street kind of, that we utilize it
Yeah.
as a street on the east side of those, and then that runs right along the west edge of or the east edge of the
Right.
large apron. So the idea is that at some point, there'll be some construction there, whether it be a hangar space or flood retention capabilities or whatever it may be, but those blast shields don't have a purpose.
Yeah. Skate park.
Yeah, you can face them at each other and Somebody's got
Tony
teenagers.
Hawk.
Mhm.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve.
Seconded.
Very good, okay.
Chairman Lyman,
Aye.
Mr. Schultz,
Aye.
Chairwoman Rolls,
Aye.
Mr. Siegfried,
Aye.
Mr. Henry.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, agenda item 12. So with the board, we have some positions, vice chair and secretary. And our former vice chair is no longer on the board, so it would be good for us to have a second vice chair. May I make a nomination, or how does this work, Bailey? Yes? Okay, so one name that has been floated out there would be Bailey Siegfried, if he would be interested in the vice chair position.
I'm open to it.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
And then Deidre Gurry, who is not here, has served as our secretary and treasurer, and I believe she is happy to continue in that role. Is that your perception also, Craig?
In the secretary position? I don't know
Yes.
if there's a question.
There's a question on the treasurer, but
Treasurer.
secretary for sure. Yes.
I would move nomination cease and we elect those two people by acclamation.
Okay,
Concur.
all right.
Chairman Lyman,
Aye.
Mr. Schultz,
Aye.
Chairwoman Rolls,
Aye.
Mr. Siegfried,
Aye.
and Mr. Henry.
Yes.
Thank you very much. We have a very good, strong board, and it is really nice to have the depth and the breadth that we have. Appreciate everyone's contributions here. Okay, yes. Moving on to, okay, yes, item number 3 really does deal with the treasurer position. And one of the things that our statute allows, so we currently have a board member, or we previously have had a board member serving as treasurer. And one of the things our statutes do allow would be for the CFO or financial manager of OSIDA to actually be the treasurer for the board. And we just kind of wanted to discuss that. I think in that regard, it is helpful to have someone who is really intimate with the workings, the cash flow, the contractual structures that we have. Because I know as a board member, we see from about a 30,000-foot level, and it is really hard sometimes to have connect the dots between all the pieces. So just wanted to discuss that, thoughts on having, so at this point, Kim Bowell is our CFO, and so she would be the person that we would recommend, that I would be considering for your, toss out there for your consideration.
So this would designate her the treasurer, but not a board member, correct?
Correct.
Supporting the board.
Yes.
Okay.
And in fairness, I know that Director Gurry has indicated that she may not be ready to give that seat up just yet. It's
Okay.
a little bit more. I wanted to put this as a placeholder in case she did show up to the meeting, and we did want to go ahead and move forward with that, but that's a
Okay.
good primer of what the responsibilities of the treasurer do. I know that there's been some trepidation in the past of other treasurers that said, I need a little more information about what's going on here, but it's perfectly allowable for, and our statutes allow and actually require that it probably be somebody that's hired by the board or by OSIDA to handle the finances. And that's what Kim's been doing for the last 19 years, 20 years. And JW is training up to take that role. So when she does retire, we've got a plan in place to continue that. So wanted to lay that out there. Wanted to put this as an agenda item in case we had everybody here so we could discuss it fully, but
Okay.
certainly understand if the board, in her absence, chooses to table this or to set it aside.
What is the state statutory requirement for the role? Is it acceptable to be a staff member and not a board member?
Yes.
So it is confirmed?
Yes, so statute, 74 LS 5208, obviously it says
who is a resident of the state or may appoint a full-time member for the service structure of the authority. And then there are requirements such as, what the treasurer has to do, like posting a bond and all of that, but that's all identified in that statute. So, yeah, the statute says either employ a person or appoint a board member.
Yeah. Is there, well, my thought, I'm not sure what my thoughts are, or if perhaps the intent was that it was a board member for objective oversight separate from the inner workings of the operation as a, good accounting principles practice. But it sounds like from what you've shared with the state statutory language is that it's not necessary to be a board member, so perhaps that wasn't the intent, was to make sure it wasn't somebody, so you don't have the same person managing all the money who is also the same person overseeing all the money. And you've had that experience where it's like, well, how do I fully know? I'm not in the details, so that's the other side.
Yeah.
Do you have thoughts or
Yeah,
comfort,
being in that
discomfort?
position, I didn't have privy to the books.
Yeah,
It's a created report that you're going off anyway,
yeah,
so,
The system-generated reports are also included in your handouts.
yeah, but, there's coding in there, there's just no way. There's no way to do that. And I wouldn't ask a volunteer to do that anyway.
yeah.
And I think then to Bailey's point, the issue of checks and balances in terms of the financial management. And so that's not something we've really discussed in detail, but your processes for, one person not determining what will be dispersed, someone having the authority to authorize the disbursement and someone else actually executing the disbursement. So you have the check and balance. So do we have that in our system?
And that's the way it works.
Yes.
Prepare the documents for me.
Kim and I can encumber the money, but it can't be paid against unless it has Craig's signature, or if it's above 50,000, a board vote and Craig's signature.
And then at the same time, we're audited by the state under law between every 2 and 3 years. So there is a check there too.
And the statutes read, such funds shall be dispersed only upon the order of or pursuant to the resolution of the board by warrant, check, authorization, or automatic deposit, signed or authorized by the treasurer or the treasurer's representative, or by such other persons as may be authorized by the board. And then again, Part C says the board of directors may in its discretion invest funds of the authority in the following. Okay, and the board shall, let me correct that, the board shall audit or have audited the books of the treasurer at least once a year. And we're actually getting ready to we're actually in the process of being audited by the state auditor and inspector's office right now. And we had one of these just 2 years ago and passed without any findings.
But that was 2 years ago, but it says.
We're going
it
into
needs to be
another one now.
1 year, or once a year.
This makes it seem as if it's you all auditing the books once a year.
Well, it's sort of making me think of, in the corporate business, private sector, and the SEC requirements of a board includes a qualified, I don't know the language off the top of my head, but qualified, basically a financial tax or accounting or CFO, a financial professional. And it makes me think that is a role that we should seek or as a board member. I think we have an open seat.
We do.
Is that right? Because I trust people, but I like to make sure we have systems, processes, checks and balances in place, and moving it out of the board. I don't want that to be something we regret. Not because I don't trust somebody, but just it gives us a little less engagement in the oversight. But we don't necessarily have, my background is not in finance, you know, a financial professional.
It sounds like that we're talking about two slightly different things. One, designating a treasurer,
Yeah.
which we could do to a non-board member, but that still doesn't relieve the board
Sure.
of the responsibility to have financial oversight. And so how are we going to exercise that responsibility is really the issue, and that's something that I guess we need to work through.
Yeah. I think you'd be a great one.
I'm not a financial professional.
Me neither.
Effectively, we've got 6.
It's really
treasurers.
just engagement that is a lot more than a volunteer.
Correct. Yeah.
It requires.
Bailey, that the statute says the board is to audit the finances on a yearly basis.
The board shall audit or have audited the books, so I guess you could bring in an auditor. The books of the treasurer at least once a year, which I mean, you do it's Craig that does the financial reports, I think, monthly at almost every board meeting.
I put together the treasurer's books and the treasurer's report every month.
So by us reviewing that and approving that, does that suffice an audit?
I am not sure, but I will look into that.
So I've been through the process before. The state audit is not what we think it is. The state audit is to make sure of the processes. The actual numbers, not as important. It's the processes. And that will make you feel, I mean, it made me feel good. But, you know, whenever you hear, we need to have an audit with pitchforks, and that's not what that is.
Well, to my knowledge, I believe that there are two separate kinds of audits from the state audit. There's a procurement audit and a financials audit. And that's what we're undergoing right now, is a financial audit, which looks at numbers.
Well, and we've operated with I think maybe the third lowest cost agency for the state for a long time, second or first lowest. And now we have 32 million. So, you know, that's a order of magnitude that it would be prudent to require a deeper or a greater oversight. And I think that's something we need to take steps to ensure that we put the right processes and oversight in place. Even though we've had good process and oversight in the past, I think it'd be prudent to increase that.
Well, then perhaps we ought to table the discussion about where to place the treasurer.
Yeah.
And ask the question of what's not that we're shooting for the minimum, but what is the minimum requirement by law that's in the statute? What is audit the books?
The
What's-
scope- what is the scope
exactly-
of that?
Yeah, what is the scope of that, so that when we put a process in place, we make sure we meet that requirement.
Yeah.
And as a state agency, can we contract with someone other than the state auditor to do that audit? We had a little flap about that an AG or two ago, and a state auditor or two ago.
Yeah.
A little bit of flap over who's gonna audit the AG's office. They were just butting heads.
So I think maybe
Personality deal.
Can you take the action to inquire if we can hire an outside firm, or maybe it's OMES, I don't know, for best practices and, a process audit as well as recommendations? Does that sound like a good step?
We can't be the only state agency that is
Yeah.
dealing with this audit question, so I'm sure there's precedent somewhere.
In consideration for reporting back at the next board meeting with options, solutions, and steps?
That's a good plan.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
and I think also your statement, it would be nice if we had someone on the board who had some amount of financial background,
Yes.
because that is one of the responsibilities of the board, and we have a broad range of experience here, but that is an expertise that we do not
Yeah.
have. So maybe as we think going forward,
Yeah.
identifying.
Could you recommend that up through the process of appointees to the governor's office, Chris, and that team? For a financial oriented, as best you can.
Or-
Okay, so they frown on that?
Oh,
Okay.
okay. Okay, I don't know how that works. but
Yeah.
I understand. Hope-
They like for those appointments to be independent
Yeah.
of what we think.
Okay.
Okay,
Well, our feelings are
there
now
we
in
go.
the public domain.
There we go. Thank you. Thank you for the good discussion. Yeah. Okay, so we don't need to vote to table it, we're just tabling. Okay,
Good discussion.
very much so. Okay, we're on agenda item 14. Do we have any board member comments regarding any of the agenda items we've discussed?
Welcome to our new board member.
So thank you, sir.
Yes.
Much appreciated.
Okay, seeing no comments. Any new business, which would be a matter that could not have reasonably been foreseen in the last 24 hours?
Yeah.
Okay, seeing no new business, then moving on. Our next board meeting is scheduled for September 11th, just to mark that on your calendars. Yeah, I know. Yeah. And then the last meeting of the calendar year is scheduled for November 13th. And will either of these meetings be at Burns Flat? Have we?
We haven't made a determination on the location of those.
Okay.
We can certainly, we're open to that.
Okay.
It's a little more pleasant going to Burns Flat, temperature-wise, in
Yeah.
September or November than it is in
July is not
August,
the
which
right
is-
time.
It's pretty pleasant out there right now, Chris.
Not bad.
It's all relative.
Yeah, it says the man from Altus.
Well said.
Okay, well, I think that covers all of our agenda items. I would entertain a motion to adjourn, if anyone would be so
So
inclined.
moved.
All right,
Second?
all right.
Who's second?
Bailey?
All right. General Lyman,
Aye.
Mr. Schultz,
Aye.
Chairwoman Rolls,
Aye.
Mr. Siegfried,
Aye.
and Mr. Henry.
Yes.
All right, thank you all very much. Our meeting is adjourned.